The psychology experiment that fooled everyone. Imagine I could slow you down without touching you. No drugs, no hypnosis, no mysterious government machine humming quietly behind a curtain. Just words. A few harmless little words on a page. This sounds ridiculous, of course. If words alone could control human behavior, every gym poster would create Olympic athletes. Every believe in yourself mug would cure laziness. And the world's most powerful person would be whoever writes fortune cookies. But in the 1990s, a psychology experiment seemed to suggest something wonderfully unsettling. It suggested that reading certain words could make people walk more slowly. Not think more slowly, not answer more slowly, walk more slowly, which is a lot of responsibility to place on vocabulary. The volunteers arrived at a laboratory believing they were taking part in a language study. This is how many strange science stories begin. A person walks into a university lab, signs a form, and confidently assumes they are about to do the thing printed on the form. This is adorable. The form is often wrong. The participants were given a simple task. They had to rearrange scrambled words into proper sentences. Nothing dramatic. No flashing lights. No electrodes. No scientist in a white coat shouting, "Release the pigeons!" Just words. Some people received ordinary words. Others unknowingly received words linked with old age. Words like retired, wrinkles, bingo, Florida. The sort of vocabulary that makes you suddenly aware of your knees. The volunteers finished the task. They stood up. They left the room. And as far as they knew, the experiment was over. But that was the trick. The real experiment was waiting in the hallway. The researchers secretly timed how long each person took to walk away. And according to the original study, the people who had seen the old age words walked more slowly than the others. Not because anyone told them to slow down. Not because they knew they were being measured. Not because someone had filled the corridor with custard, which would have been scientifically interesting but administratively difficult. The claim was stranger. The old age words may have quietly activated ideas about aging, and those ideas may have nudged the body. A word became a thought became a movement, and the person doing the moving had no idea any of this mental paperwork had been filed. It was as if the word wrinkles had wandered into the brain, found the walking department, and said, "Right then, let's not rush." This became one of the most famous examples of something called priming. Priming is the idea that exposure to one thing can influence how your brain responds to something else. Some kinds of priming are well established. If you hear the word doctor, your brain may recognize the word nurse more easily. If you see something frightening, your brain becomes faster at spotting danger. If you smell fresh bread, your brain may suddenly remember that your diet was always more of a suggestion than a binding legal contract. The brain is constantly preparing itself for what might happen next. It is not sitting politely in your skull like a quiet librarian. It is guessing, sorting, predicting, interrupting, making emergency plans, canceling emergency plans, then pretending all of this was deliberate. Most of this happens beneath awareness. You do not feel your brain doing it. You do not wake up and say, "Excellent. Today my unconscious has preloaded several bakery memories and one irrational fear of emails." You simply experience the final result and call it me. That is what made the walking experiment so fascinating. It seemed to suggest that a simple idea could slip into the machinery of behavior without the person noticing. A few words on a page might not just change what someone thought, they might change how someone moved, which is either fascinating, alarming, or very bad news for anyone who has ever read a birthday card after turning 40. But this is where the story needs a seatbelt, because the experiment became famous, and then, like many famous things in psychology, it walked straight into a fight. Years later, other researchers tried to reproduce the walking result. Some studies found similar kinds of effects. Others struggled to reproduce this exact result. Then came an even stranger possibility. What if the participants were not the only people being influenced? What if the researchers' own expectations mattered too? In one later study, Experimenters who expected people to walk slowly appeared more likely to produce that result, which means the question became wonderfully awkward. Were the participants being primed? Were the researchers being primed? Was everyone being primed? Was the hallway itself somehow involved? At this point, psychology entered the phase where everyone looks suspiciously at the clipboard. And this is why the story is better than a simple mind control headline. Because science is not supposed to find one exciting result, frame it, and spend the next 50 years admiring it under soft lighting. Science is supposed to be annoying. It is supposed to come back with more questions. Can this happen again? Can a different lab find it? Does the effect survive stricter testing? Was the original result large? Was it small? Was it real? Was it a fluke? Was someone, somewhere, accidentally helping the result along? That is not science failing. That is science doing its job. It just looks messy from the outside. One study says yes, another says no. A third says, possibly, but only under conditions so specific they should probably have their own postcode. Human behavior is difficult to study. You are not measuring a falling rock. You are measuring a living person. A person with memories, moods, habits, expectations, distractions, hunger, tiredness, comfortable shoes, uncomfortable shoes, and possibly a deep private hatred of fluorescent lighting. The human brain is not a machine with one big button labeled behavior. It is more like a large government department where every room has a committee, every committee has subcommittees, and nobody knows who authorized the biscuits. So the safest version of this story is not, words definitely control your legs. That is too simple. The better version is this. Your brain is constantly being shaped by cues you do not fully notice. Some of those cues may affect what you think. Some may affect what you feel. Some may affect what you do. And some may do absolutely nothing except give psychologists something to argue about for 30 years. Which, in fairness, is not nothing. The world is always touching your mind. Not dramatically, not like a villain in a laboratory. Quietly. A headline you glanced at. A song playing in a shop. A face in a crowd. A smell from a bakery. A phrase someone said yesterday. A memory that woke up without asking permission. Most of these things vanish before you can name them, but your brain may still have taken notes. That is the strange part. You spend your entire life inside your own mind. You hear its thoughts. You feel its fears. You trust its decisions. You assume you know what is going on in there because, frankly, you live there. But some of the most interesting work happens in rooms you cannot enter. Behind the conscious mind, there is a whole backstage crew moving scenery, changing lights, pulling ropes, losing important documents, and occasionally sending the wrong actor onto the stage. Then consciousness walks out afterward and says, yes, that is exactly what I meant to do. This may be one of the great jokes of being human. We feel like captains, but often we may be more like passengers who are occasionally allowed to hold the wheel for photographs. We say, I chose this. I felt that. I decided. And perhaps we did. But perhaps the brain had already leaned slightly in that direction before we arrived. Perhaps the decision began as a whisper, a word, a smell, a memory, a tiny cue from the world. Something too small to notice, but not too small to matter. That does not mean you are helpless. It does not mean words are magic. It does not mean the word bingo is crouching in the bushes waiting to attack your walking speed. It means the mind is stranger, busier, and less tidy than it feels. And that may be the best lesson from this famous, debated, slightly troublesome experiment. Not that it proved everything, but that it asked a question we still cannot completely escape. How much of you is chosen by you? And how much begins quietly, below awareness, before you notice yourself becoming certain? So the next time you walk down a hallway, pause for a second. Not because hidden words are controlling your shoes, but because the world may have already whispered something to your brain before you even took the first step. If you enjoyed this strange little journey, subscribe and help us reach 1 million curious minds. There are many more weird facts hiding in plain sight, and we intend to bother all of them.